Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this special Leading and Learning event. I'm Javier Alberto Soto, the President and CEO of the Denver Foundation. My honor to welcome you today. I'm so delighted that you all took the time to be here with us today to learn about some of our efforts during the last legislative session and to do a deep dive into those issues of importance to the foundation and to our community. Policy and advocacy is a renewed focus at the Denver Foundation as a result of our new strategic framework. We're delighted to have this deep dive conversation with you today and our invited guests. Leading and Learning is an event series that brings together Denver Foundation stakeholders to learn more and to co-create solutions for a more vibrant Metro Denver. This includes some of the policy priorities that we've highlighted as part of our policy agenda, and that we've been actively exploring at the local and state level over these past several months. And I'm going to invite now our Director of Policy and Advocacy, who's been leading all of this work, to welcome our very, very special guests to the panel today. I'll turn it over to Naomi Amaha, Policy Director at the Denver Foundation. Naomi?
Thank you, Javier, and good afternoon, everyone. So excited to have you here. All right, to start, I wanted to share some thoughts before I jump into introducing our panelists for today. You know, as an organization, we believe that policy and advocacy change is so critical to making our communities better. The Denver Foundation has always led on issues that are important to our community, but this year we've had a renewed focus on this work. As an organization, we believe we have a responsibility to take bold steps to advance racial equity and drive meaningful systemic change to improve our communities. And one way we do this is through policy and advocacy. The Denver Foundation is pleased to share we were successful with all of the policy positions that we supported this last legislative session. These positions were informed by our assessment of each policy proposal, conversations with various stakeholders, and our policy principles that were developed through feedback from various stakeholders of the organization. Today, we'll speak with two leaders who understand these issues very deeply. We look forward to a thoughtful conversation that will hopefully leave us all feeling more knowledgeable and hopeful for what is to come in future legislative efforts. All right, and I invite our senators to come on video and join us. Thank you both for being here. So excited for this conversation. So again, I'm going to start with introductions, and I'll first start with Senator James Coleman. Senator Coleman is a Democrat from Denver who was born and raised in Denver's Park Hill neighborhood, of which he is a resident and currently serves in Senate District 33. When the senator was elected to his first term in 2016, Senator Coleman was the youngest Colorado state legislator. After serving 2 terms as a state representative for House District 7, he won his election to Senate District 33 in November of 2020. Currently, Senator Coleman serves as the chair of the Senate State Affairs, Veterans, and Military Affairs Committee, one of which he makes a very great experience for attendees. He also serves as the vice chair of Senate Business, Labor, and Technology, is a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, the Legislative Council Committee, and serves on the Interim Committee of School Finance. Senator Coleman has sponsored a number of bills to protect workers and veterans' rights, bolster small business, provide resources to schools, to create opportunities for higher education, increasing health coverage and behavioral and mental health supports, direct criminal justice reforms, and preserve our environment. The senator's 3 legislative priorities are eliminating the wealth gap, decreasing prison recidivism, and ending youth violence. Thank you, Senator Coleman. Also, I want to introduce Senator Paul Lundeen. Senator Lundeen is a Republican from the Monument area. Senator Lundeen currently serves in the Colorado State Senate and is a senator from the 9th District. He also serves as chairman for the Senate Majority Fund and serves as the Senate Republican Whip. Previously, he served 2 terms in the House as a representative of the 19th House District. Before coming to the House of Representatives, Senator Lundeen served 4 years on the State Board of Education, including 2 years where he served as chairman. Senator Lundeen served as a Washington correspondent, and you can hear it in his voice as he speaks, and also has credentials, was a credentialed reporter for the White House, for a chain of radio and television stations across the Western United States. Over the past 2 decades, Senator Lundeen has built businesses in Colorado and across Western United States and provided services including real estate development, student learning centers, marketing services, and investment management. As mentioned, Senator Lundeen has been so successful in his work around journalism, public policy, and business. First off, I want to thank you both again for joining us today. And want to start with kind of a big, broad question as we think about what were the biggest themes of this legislative session. And to start, I'll turn things over to Senator Lundeen.
Excellent. How's my audio? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, Director Amaha, thank you very much for that introduction. Thanks for convening this. I would pass my gratitude on to President Soto as well, and to the Denver Foundation, your nonprofit partners, your professional advisors, and quite frankly, your donors who continue to make these things possible. Let me start even bigger than the big themes of the legislative session and talk a little bit about the General Assembly itself. 100 members elected from the state of Colorado based on population, 65 members in the House and 35 members in the Senate. It's our job to bring the perspectives, the philosophies, the best ideas when we are doing our job the best we can to the General Assembly for a conversation around what the people of Colorado are hoping we can achieve and what we can do on their behalf. I will tell you, it is an honor to be in the General Assembly, and it is a privilege and a hoot. It is a fun experience serving with Senator Coleman. He is a brother in Christ. Quite frankly, he is an effective member of the General Assembly, and he is, quite frankly, one of the most loquacious members of the body, even though he chooses not to speak that much. But when he speaks with clarity, precision, and he speaks important ideals. So to the big issues that I perceived this last legislative session were about, our caucus, and quite frankly, many in the Democrat caucus saw the same thing. The 3 biggest issues that the people of Colorado were crying out about were the lack of affordability of life, inflation, and the cost of living in Colorado is just running away from people's ability to access the things that they would like to do to make their life better and to make their children's lives better than their life has been. The second thing people have been crying out about, and we'll get into policy issues, what happened and what didn't happen in the session. But the second issue that people were crying out about is safety. Is my neighborhood safer or more dangerous than it was a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago? And many people are perceiving that they are not as safe as they were even just a few years ago. And so making our communities safer is an important part of what the people are calling out for as well. And the third thing is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart, and that is parents, especially coming out of the coronavirus, the COVID experience, were saying, hey, I want to have more authority, more control over what's going on in my child's education. And a great indicator of just how vigorously those parents were engaging in that conversation is the number of students who just opted out of public education altogether. They said, I'm going to go find something that serves my child's needs better. Almost 60,000 of the 900,000 students in Colorado public education opted out of public education. They said, I'm going to find a different and better pathway forward for my child. So those are the 3 big issues that we engaged in. We engaged in many other big issues as well. But from my perspective, and quite frankly, from what I was hearing from the people of Colorado, safer communities, more affordable life, and greater authority of a parent over their child's education and upbringing. Those were the big 3 issues that I heard about. And quite frankly, we engaged on a number of bills that dealt with those issues.
Thank you, Senator Lundeen. Senator Coleman, would love to hear your thoughts on big themes that transpired this legislative session.
Hey, thank you, Naomi, and also thank you to Javier for having us. I got to give a quick shout out to you, Naomi. I know we had a chance to go to a bill signing recently, and I was blessed to be able to get a bill signed and offer you the pen, quite frankly, because you and so many folks involved with the Denver Foundation do a lot of work behind the scenes, get absolutely no credit. And, it's important for us to recognize and acknowledge you all for the work you do to help us in the building to get these kinds of policies passed. So I want to say thank you to you and a shout out to Senator Lundeen. Senator Lundeen is somebody who I have learned a great deal from, so much so that when I moved from the House to the Senate, I intentionally picked the seat that's directly behind him on the Senate floor. So I get
So
to
he
not
can
only
flick my ears is why he did that.
that's what I was gonna say. I can only flick his ears, but I can also hear from him, get perspective, and we get a chance to fellowship there on the floor. So it's an honor and privilege to be able to serve with you also, Senator. And so, look, I would just concur with a lot of what Senator Lundeen said, that collectively, I think access and affordability were two of the biggest themes, and in particular, housing. A lot of people found out there are things that don't matter as much as just having a place to live, and which bleeds into the next thing, which I think is business and labor. People being able to find employment that would pay them the kind of money they need to afford to be able to live here in the state of Colorado. And with COVID really impacted people's ability to work in person, impacted their health conditions. And so housing, business and labor, and again, something that Senator Lundeen and I really love to discuss is education, because education is at the base of all of our lived experiences. Every one of us here on this Zoom in this meeting have had an opportunity to get an education, and it determined whether or not we would be successful in whatever we desired we would do in life. And so those are really, really important things. The cost of living has all been a part of this session's legislative priorities. And personally, as you stated, Naomi, our three priorities in my office: prison recidivism, youth violence, the Black wealth gap. All of them have to do with access and affordability. And we're all Americans, all right? We're all Coloradans, regardless of a different perspective or political ideology. Affordability is a huge issue in our state. People need to have the freedom to work hard, to be paid a livable wage, to have somewhere to live, and to be able to afford food and healthcare. So, we've been able to achieve so much this session, but across the state, it feels like it's not enough. Many still need greater supports and commitments, and I'm glad to continue that great work with my colleague, Senator Lundeen.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. It's great to hear that kind of just consistent theme, regardless of party affiliation and whatnot. And those are things too, as advocates, we saw loud and clear from community members, and just, again, the policies that were considered this session. So I have another question for both of you. We can start with Senator Coleman this time. What bill are you most proud of from this last legislative session? And I'll caveat that could be something you sponsored, took a support position on, maybe something that was a priority for your caucus. But yeah, I would love to hear from each of you around what was the thing that you're most proud of from this session.
Yeah, Naomi, thank you for that question. So the bill that I'm most proud of, I'd say, is Senate Bill 50. It's the work opportunities for offenders in the DOC, in the Department of Corrections. I had an opportunity to work on this bill with Senator Dennis Heisey, a really good friend of mine who's been really involved in what's going on with DOC. This bill encourages the Department of Corrections to recruit, organize, create some additional programs that focus on providing meaningful and optional work opportunities and skill training for those who were incarcerated. Senate Bill 50 allows incarcerated population to earn a minimum wage. And this is a historic achievement for our state. All of this can be done within the department's budget, which is great, Senate Bill 50. And it will be done without raising tax dollars. That's really important, that although we have money at the state level, we figure out ways to not increase the costs inside of government, and figure out how we put more money out to the people. And in this case, it's funding for this kind of a program. And the bill's actions align with our stated goals. And if you want to work, it should be available to you, and it should pay a livable wage. And so roughly 50% of Colorado's formerly incarcerated will ultimately return. And the economic barriers in employment, housing, and education, I think it is only further impedes them from rebuilding upon release. And, we know that that policy is needed. The last thing I'll share quickly about this, which made it really fun, the Gaylord Convention Center is not in my district. It's just outside of my district. But most of the folks who work in the airport, which is in my district, and the Gaylord live in my district. And so the general manager has been a good friend, a good help. She's actually employing currently incarcerated women in a Denver Women's Correctional Facility that's in my district, and providing them $17 to $25 an hour to do housekeeping and to work in the kitchens. And when they get out, they have not only savings, they also have employment, they have benefits because they've been there for maybe at least 90 days. So it's a real deterrent for them going back into the correctional system. And so I'm really proud of that bill and what it means, not only for human beings and people and humanity, but also for the economy in the state of Colorado.
Thank you. Senator Lundeen.
Fair enough. There's so many bills that I work diligently on, I care so much about. I'll pick one that actually didn't get across the finish line and start with that. Senate Bill 03939. It was a big bill, and that's probably the reason ultimately it didn't get across the finish line. In Colorado, we spend about $14 billion a year in public education. For the 900,000 or now about 850,000 students who are in public education. But still, even with that big amount that we spend, there's a shortfall. It's called the BS, or the Budget Stabilization Factor, and it's about $700 million. Senate Bill 39 that I authored and brought would have paid that off. And it would have said, not only are we going to pay off that additional funding that we should be putting into public education, I want it to go specifically to teacher paychecks. I believe there is a magical triangle, a golden triangle: enthusiastic students, engaged parents, and exceptional teachers. And part of the way to get exceptional teachers is to pay them better. And Senate Bill 39 would have done that. And it did one other thing that I think is critically missing in public education today. And that is, it provided some freedom for parents who are finding that their child needs supports or needs a slightly different educational pathway. It would have provided the option through a Hope Scholarship, is what we called it. And it would have provided not that much money. It was about $25 million in Hope Scholarship funds to let parents choose tutoring or additional supports or whatever their child might need. So too big of an idea for the last legislative session. Maybe we'll get it across the goal line in the future. Senator Coleman, let's talk more about that.
I'm looking forward to it.
I like that.
Thank you, Senator Lundeen. We did have a question in case we were running early around what didn't get done that we wanted to see. So I'm really glad you were able to touch on that bill. All right, next question, and I'll open it up to whoever wants to start first. You both sit on different sides of the political aisle, but you work together really well. How do you bridge the divides to come together and work on issues, even maybe at times where you're on opposite sides of a particular policy proposal or a concept?
Senator, you want to go first? You want me to dive in?
Dive in. Beauty before age, please.
I think you got that one. I'll go first. So here's the way I approach it. And politics has always been a very challenging, some people would say it's even a cynical business at times. It seems in the last 5, 7, 8 years, it's gotten even more fraught with division. The extreme right has become more vigorous and noisy. The extreme left has become more vigorous and noisy. And that is creating this cacophony of noise that really is not productive to what we're trying to do. So one of the principles, one of the ground rules I try to always use is seek first to understand and then to be understood. Because I truly believe that we as a society do better when we bring a diversity of perspectives, a diversity of ideas, a diversity of experiences into the policy creation conversation. And so I think we need to do a better job of actually making the effort to listen. Now, we deal as legislators with a lot of bills. You saw, I think it was 657 bills this session. That was a lower mark than frequently. Frequently, we'll have 750 or 770 bills that we deal with. That's a lot of information to process through. So sometimes time is the enemy of those opportunities to seek to first to understand before you seek to be understood. Sometimes we start talking before we actually know what the perspective from the other side of the conversation may be. I think knowing that, acknowledging that, and seeking to move past that and actually look into the conversation. Say, I truly want to understand, is there an opportunity here for us to do something that's beneficial to the people of the state and sustainable in a natural way, in an organic way? When we create programs that the only way to sustain them is to raise more and more money to pour into them, tax dollars, increasing tax dollars, in an environment where people are already struggling to pay the family's bills, that becomes an unsustainable type of solution. So I'm always looking for policies that are organically self-sustaining. And it should begin with a conversation that says, okay, I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're trying to do with this. Here is what I would like to hear, your perspective first. And then when we've heard that, I'll tell you my perspective as well.
So that's a great answer. I would only add, again, really quickly, I don't actually sit across the aisle. I deliberately picked a seat behind Senator Lundeen so that I could be closer to him and some other folk. No, I would say, you know, one of the things is communicating early and often. Senator Lundeen, didn't you help, or did you found and create the interim school finance committee?
I did. That was back when I was still in the House.
So the reason why I say that to you all, we have to really emphasize great stakeholding. So great stakeholding is about finding common solutions to common problems. We all know there's a problem. A lot of times folks disagree on a solution. So even if we disagree on a solution, we don't disagree that there is a problem. And this begs a willingness to come across the aisle and work together. And Senator Lundeen and I have worked together all summer, last summer, on the school finance committee, something that he helped create with a bipartisan build makeup, but also a bipartisan policy recommendations that come from that committee. And so we've worked together on a number of many other issues, but I think it's just really important to give him his credit in that way, because sometimes we need conversation before January. January oftentimes is too late. We think we have January through May and it's a lot of time, but with all those bills that Senator Lundeen shared, we don't sometimes have the time to really deep dive into issues to help get to the root of the problem to solve it. And so the fact that he helped and created the interim school finance committee, which I was able to sit on, you know, there's the bill, one of the bills that I know that you all are interested in and supported on in terms of the at-risk student measure for school finance, it came from that committee. And so I just wanted to say, I think he is leading by action and not by just word only. And he's done that boldly, because he and I both have had opponents in our primaries who disagree with our ability to be bipartisan. But because of his efforts and mine and all of our colleagues, I think over 80% of the bills that we pass are bipartisan, which is great because we all agree on the solution as well as there's a problem and we want to help fix those things. So that's how you do it.
You do it. I appreciate both of you so much and just these really thoughtful responses. Some of my biggest takeaways this last session is stakeholder process is critical, and people deeply care about the state of Colorado and really want to see policies that move forward that work for everyone. So I appreciate both of your perspectives on how you bridge that divide sometimes. So you, Senator Coleman, kind of lead it into our next question. The foundation took positions on a numerous number of bills, but one bill we wanted to touch on to start is House Bill 22-1202, the at-risk student measure for school finance. This was one that came out of that interim committee, and it aims to address racial disparities in school funding by expanding how at-risk students are identified using existing data points. So I would love to hear from you both why this bill is so important as we think about equity in school funding, as we think about school funding in general, and the hope that you both have for what this bill will accomplish.
Yeah, I'll start off just to say, you know, there's a few issues, Naomi, with identifying at-risk students in the way that the existing measure does, which makes this bill so important. I think one is free and reduced lunch. Only accounts for income status, and it left off families that earn even $1 above the cutoff who are still struggling. Number two, it's a binary measure, meaning it doesn't account for the different levels of needs that the students have. Also, to qualify for FRL, free reduced lunch, parents must fill out a paper application, but with the universal free meal program our schools adopt, families are less likely to fill out those forms as their children already eat for free at the school. And then lastly, schools tend to have delays in processing these forms, even if and when they are completed. And so the intended impact is that our children, deserve to simply be children. I talk about this a lot. You walk into a building, you have no idea when a student walks into a building what else they're dealing with, and we're expecting them to just learn. We're expecting our teachers to just teach. But it's our children, they deserve to be children, but instead are constantly reeling from the issues impacting their schools and their education. So measures like these allow us to meet our children where they're at, with the goal of better providing their individual needs and ensuring that every child's needs are met. So I'm really grateful for having had the opportunity to work on this bill with Senator Lundeen. Senator Zenzinger was the prime sponsor. And one last point I'll make is really critical about the bipartisanship. Normally we have a Democrat and Republican sponsors, primes on these bills that come out of this bipartisan committee. But Senator Lundeen allowed me to be on this bill with Senator Zenzinger, a Democrat, because this issue was really, really important to me as I serve a high percentage of low-income families in my district. And so I want to say again, thank you, Senator Lundeen, for supporting me and prime sponsoring this bill.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the hard work that Senator Coleman did on this bill 1202. It's an important bill. The wise old sage said that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I believe we need to completely transform the education funding formula. Right now, it is based on an agrarian calendar, an industrial clock. It has echoes of Prussian martial order in it. There are so many things that are just part of what it was. Well, we've always done it that way, and it just grows and grows and grows and grows. And now it's a $14 billion industry. And it is designed, the funding formula is designed to honor the system, the industry itself, instead of the customers, the students. And I think we need to completely rework that. Well, back to the journey of 1,000 miles. That's the big story. We need to completely rework this formula and make it about students. Well, this particular bill took that first step in a meaningful way to say, look, there are at-risk students, the students who are the most challenged, and we need to pay the most attention to. We need to make sure they're funded and acknowledge who they are and how they arrive at the doorstep of the school. This bill begins to do that. Now, 1202 was more around specific economic circumstances of the family. It deals with direct certification instead of free and reduced lunch. Those are good steps, but we need to look further. We need to look into other things that qualify a student as at risk. We need to truly know, discern, understand, and be responsible to engaging with that student from the circumstances in which they come and into the circumstances of who they may be. So it's a great step on the right path, but we've got a long way to go. That first step on the 1,000-mile journey has been taken. Hallelujah.
Yes, got to start somewhere.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both for your perspectives on that. It was something that we were very proud to support and to be a part of the bill and its journey. And thank all of the advocacy groups and partners that helped shepherd that work in partnership with you all. Okay, I want to touch on another bill. Another big theme we saw from this legislative session was bills to address air quality and changes due to climate change. And one of the bills that we supported was Senate Bill 180, which will provide free transit services for at least 30 days during what we call ozone season, which is when the air quality is just really bad. This passed on the last day of session because there were changes in each chamber and reconciliation and all of the steps in the process. But curious for both of you, what impacts do you think that will have on transit and air quality?
Senator Coleman, I'll let you go first because I'm not quite so sanguine on this one.
It's all good. Look, I would say really quickly, it's two things. One, the benefit is exactly as it's stated and what it says. Many folks simply can't access transportation, and extreme weather only exacerbates these issues. I'd say also we have to think of transportation in terms of access as well. Folks are using public transportation and go to the doctor, to go to work, pick up, drop off children, see family, and more. And so I think this is a bill that can create more opportunities for folks to take advantage of public transit, while also by default, less cars being on the road would help when it comes to our environment. And so this is a bill that I think will address those two issues. And I appreciate your work and advocacy on this at the Denver Foundation.
Yeah, and my response is this is a step, but I'm not as sanguine as I said. I'm not as hopeful that this will generate the positive results that we'd like to see. I agree with the concerns, the objectives that Senator Coleman has raised. We need to help people get where they need to get in order to live their lives. The challenge we have is we suffer from the realities of physics. Metcalfe's law applies here. Metcalfe's law is a fancy phrase that describes the value of a network. And the value of a network expands exponentially with the number of nodes on the network. Well, what does that mean? So I went to school at NYU, is where I went to college. The New York City Metropolitan Transit Authority subway system is a high value network. You get on the subway in any neighborhood, and you get off the subway in any other neighborhood, and you do your business. It's easy to do that. More challenging here in Colorado, even in Denver Metro. The reality is we've got broader expanses to cover, and getting that node on the network close enough to the place where a person needs to go to take care of their business is more challenging. Buses can help with this, but I think technology at the end of the day is going to be the piece of the puzzle that ultimately helps us in the very broad, wide open spaces of the West solve the problem. Autonomous vehicles, still a ways away. There was a few years ago, there were a few autonomous vehicles and things weren't working out quite as well as people hoped they would. But I think autonomous vehicles will come back, and they help us solve what they call that last mile. Sometimes it's the last 600 yards or the last quarter mile that a person needs. But transit is challenged in the West, just given some basic fundamentals of physics.
Thank you for that perspective, Senator Lundeen. We realize, yes, this is one piece of the larger transportation system, and it is so different when you are on the Front Range, Western Slopes, other parts of the state. So appreciate both of your perspectives on that bill. I have one question I'll start with Senator Coleman on, and then Senator Lundeen would love your thoughts as well. A bill that the foundation supported was House Bill 22-1356, which will help provide funding to support the infrastructure and capacity needs of smaller nonprofits. The funding will be prioritized for those nonprofits to provide culturally appropriate and relevant services and resources for families and communities that have been historically underrepresented and under-resourced, which was further exacerbated by the pandemic. Our very own Lundeen Sullivan, who's the director of our Black Resilience in Colorado Fund, was a member of the steering committee that helped lead this bill. So Senator Coleman, would love to hear from you why this bill is so important and why you supported it.
Naomi, thank you so much. I love embarrassing Lundeen. She is a good friend of mine. I want to call her out. I want to just talk so good about her. I know we're not here for that, but again, she is going to be upset that I'm giving her credit and kudos for coming out from outside of the Capitol into the Capitol to be able to engage in making sure this kind of a policy gets passed. So again, as you shared, BRIC, the Black Resilience in Colorado Fund, helps to cover a lot of operational costs for many of the entities that will benefit from this bill now that it's been signed into law in terms of infrastructure and capacity. And I think it's really important that we do have folks like Lundeen and BRIC helping to navigate and facilitate the implementation of this bill. And so oftentimes when folks are doing development, they're compensated on the back end, meaning they must have the means to front all of the upfront costs in order to do a project. And so, if they can't afford to do all the work without any compensation, they won't apply. And it slashes the diversity of applicants. So I think this bill made it so that the folks who are doing the work can get up to 50% of the compensation necessary in order to complete the projects. And so I just think that that's necessary, because a lot of the things we've seen in terms of diversifying the workforce, the folks who can actually do the work, get contracts to do infrastructure and capacity work. A lot of it is that they're disqualified before they can even get started. They can't even apply. They can't take advantage of those opportunities because they don't even qualify. So I think this is a great bill that steps in the right direction to help when it comes to infrastructure and capacity for small local organizations. Thank you, Brick, again, and Lundeen for all the work you're doing. And thank you, Denver Foundation, for coming down and testify and support that bill.
So this is a good example of the judicious use of one-time money. And to the extent this gives us the ability to build capacity and create sustainability through other sources in the future, it's beneficial. To the extent this puts us in a spot where we create something and we realize, oh my gosh, this was one-time money that we had coming in because of the COVID relief dollars. And now we've created a structure. We need more money to keep that alive. We're setting ourselves up for challenges. So the caution I would offer is, let's make sure that this develops its own sustainability over the 2 or 3, it's either 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 years that it is pre-funded. Let's make sure we get it where it needs to go so that it can live on to the extent we find value in it of its own organic growth, not with an expectation of additional dollars, because those dollars very likely will not be there.
Thank you for that perspective. And we'll have another question as it relates to American Rescue Plan dollars and what that means for our state. One question I definitely wanted to touch on, we are virtual today, is House Bill 1413, which will allow the legislature to continue to take remote testimony from across the state. This is a huge equity issue, and this bill will help make it possible for more people to participate in the policymaking process. Would love to hear from each of you how it's been taking remote testimony, through the pandemic and through the last legislative session, and what impact you think it'll have on the policymaking process. And there's a couple other pieces of that too, but I want to start there. Maybe start with you, Senator Lundeen.
Sure. To allow the people access to their government, 2 thumbs up. I'm all in for that. And I'd offer up some advice. Those of you who testify remotely, you need to know it's harder to punch through. It's harder to get your message on the table the same way somebody who's sitting in the room at the dais or speaking directly to the dais can do. So you need to speak clearly. You need to make sure your audio connections are good. There are some significant challenges with making remote testimony useful, but I think giving the public access to it, like I said, 2 thumbs up. One of the things that I have been very frustrated about is we've got 100 members of the General Assembly. If you're sick, stay home. But if you're not, come to work. I think the members should be in the building and should do their work member to member. So much of what we do is based on relationship. It's based on conversations that you want to have the nuances of that conversation. When I look in James Coleman's eyes, I am seeing the soul of a man that is true in everything he says. And I can get the nuances and the details, and I can tell, oh my, this is one of those, this is a hill Senator Coleman's going to die on. And you know what? I don't want him to die alone. I'm going with him. 197 this last session. There are certain bills where, it's just super helpful to be able to have that relational connection of the legislators in the body. So I'm going to be really clear. I support public access to remote testimony. Not so happy about members of the General Assembly trying to do their job from remote. Show up and do your work.
I like that. Show up and do the work. Listen, I'll start by saying that anyone who knows me knows that I prefer in-person dialogue. Okay, it gives a real connection, ones that were lost, unfortunately, due to COVID. Okay, I want to respect everybody's privacy. I might give you some dap, might give you some 5, might give you a hug. Usually I give Senator Lundeen a hug, but this bill encourages constituents to participate in the decision-making process in the Capitol building. So I think remote testimony should be here to stay. We want them to be heard. We want them to inform and advise us, and we want them to speak to support us as their elected officials. And so, the challenges of being outside of the Denver metro and far from the Capitol is that folks have to work. They have families, they have other challenges, and therefore it makes it hard for them to be able to come to the building. So fully agree with Senator Lundeen. We are elected, we run, we knock to be in this position. No one's forcing us. And so because of that, we really should want to be in the building. And I think a lot of us want to, but then there are times things come up. When it comes to Senate Bill 197, Senator Lundeen was a major advocate for that bill. You know, he had an appointment, he had to step away, and he was so committed in the middle of an appointment that he hopped on a Zoom to still be a part of the committee.
Because the rules allowed.
The rules allowed, which I was like, man, where are you going? He's like, don't worry, I'll be on. And then he came back to be able to be in person to finish it out. So, you know, I'm grateful for it. And I think it allows more and more people to be involved in democracy. So we love it.
Yes, it has been, I know, for many, just a great resource when things come up, especially if they can't be in the building, you know, till midnight or something changes last minute. So I know for me, it's been great to see. And I just got to give a shout out to all the staff that do so much work to make that happen, especially when there are technical difficulties, which we know happens. All right, I'm going to put it over to an audience question for each of you. This audience member is wondering if either of you have ideas about reforming the state procurement process so that the approach of contracting out needed government services in lieu of hiring permanent staff isn't limited to just large organizations or companies who can navigate complexities. And they give an example of like ultra high level insurance.
All right, I gotta tell you, man, I don't know which one of my friends is giving me this question, because we literally passed a bill this year, Senate Bill 163, and then I'll open it up to my colleague to share his perspective. But Senator Angela Williams, who Senator Lundeen had an opportunity to serve with in the Senate prior to me, I come after her. She laid the foundation for a diversity of more women-owned, more minority-owned businesses getting access to state contracts. And so that was great because she, along with the rest of us at the legislature, passed a disparity study to determine whether enough minority and women-owned businesses existed in a particular industry, and the one in particular you questioned, in order for us to help navigate the process for those who just normally don't get those contracts at the state level. Those who don't qualify for those contracts at the state level. So I'm super excited about that bill, because with the Department of Personnel Administration, they will be helping those businesses who typically don't get access to those state contracts, access those through two things. One, awareness. Some folks don't even know what state contracts exist. So it's important that they know about those state contracts, that it's made public and accessible for them to apply. Number two is the navigation process to be able to access those contracts and obtain them, to have a legitimate opportunity. A lot of what we saw during COVID, when it came to federal dollars we received, and folks could apply if they had a business to get them, is that they didn't qualify because, you know, the qualification was they had to have so many employees, but they may have been a single proprietor. They had one, it was a mom and pop shop, sole proprietorship, you know, or things like that. So, you know, they might have had to have a certain revenue annually coming in, and they automatically didn't qualify. So this is the same thing we're doing with state procurement. And the goal is for us to see a diversity in those contracts. The last thing I'll share quickly is there's a cost to apply for those contracts. And so we also set aside some funding available through 163, this bill, to help cover the cost for some of those businesses that can apply and take advantage of the procurement of state contracts.
This is one of those where the what I'm in complete agreement with. I think that a broader array of service providers, contract respondents, people that are capable and able to respond to state RFPs is very important. We need to get at that. I would have approached this differently, and ultimately I voted against this particular bill simply because it created 6 additional government employees. And part of the challenge is we all get frustrated when we bump up against the bureaucracy, and it's typically a well-meaning person on the other end of the, who was in the bureaucracy. They want to do something to help you, but they say, well, the rules only allow me to do A, B, C, and you're asking me to do E, F, G, and I can't do E, F, G. So I would have tried to create greater transparency. I would have approached it in a different way, but the what I'm 100% in with. Creating more government employees, I think at the end of the day, may not create the positive response we're hoping it creates.
Thank you both for those perspectives and for our audience member for putting that out. So we're getting close to time. I have a few questions left. So we are in what is called the interim, and there's a lot that members do in terms of the work leading up to the next legislative session. What can we expect to see over the summer as it relates to the interim committees, allocating funds that were approved during the legislative session that are American Rescue Plan dollars? Just curious what you all are hearing or seeing and what work has maybe already started.
Senator Coleman, I'll let you answer. I've got a few interim duties that I have to take care of. I owe Representative McCluskey a return phone call regarding the interim school finance. But as Senator Coleman mentioned, I've got a primary. So right now, when I'm not on calls like this, talking with people, following up on legislative duties I'm out knocking on doors, talking to constituents, trying to convince them to send me back to the Capitol.
Yeah, listen, up until June 28th, I'm out knocking on doors in Monument to get Paul Lundeen elected. So now after June 28th, he's kind of on his own, but no, just joking.
Hey, we're walking this Saturday at 10 a.m. I'll send you the address, Senator Coleman.
Love it. Love it. Look, just continue conversations, Naomi, to build off the work we did this last session. Sometimes things don't translate over to the next session. And it's kind of like, well, that was then. We passed that and we'll leave it off, leave it there. It's like, well, what did we do this year that was good? And how do we continue to do more work to build on that, which is one of the blessings we have in the Senate. Once Senator Lundeen is reelected and he has 4 more years, his platform and timeline to build off things is different than it was for us when we were both in the House. We were constantly running. So we have a chance to build on those issues that we worked on this year, some interim committees to continue to figure out ways to work on education supports, mental health, housing, and more. And then lastly, these conversations help inform and create the bills we just passed, such as the jail standards bill that we worked on. Senator Cook and I served as prime sponsors for a bill that makes it so that the standards across the state of Colorado in jails are the same, that there is equality and equity. And so there's a commission and task force meetings that we must be a part of, but it's just making sure that the policies that we pass are being implemented and we prepare for the next year and the policies that we will work on.
Thank you both. And thank you for touching on implementation too, Senator Coleman. That's sometimes the next iteration as we think about policy making. So you kind of touched on something that leads to the next question. It is an election year, and just a reminder for folks, we don't endorse any political candidates.
What? No, just joking.
We are a 501c3, but we are able to take positions on ballot measures. And, in Colorado, we often see a lot of issues getting sent to the voters for their consideration. Some things are out for signature. There's some things that the legislature referred. Just curious what you all are seeing as it relates to ballot measures that, voters will be considering this November.
Yeah, let me dive in first because I have one that I care deeply about. We offer honor in unique ways in America. And one of the ways we honor people is sometimes we give our elders, whom we are called to honor, we give them a homestead exemption, a small tax deduction on their home so they can stay in their home. Well, this last session we passed House Concurrent Resolution 1003. And this will be on the ballot. It referred it out to the people to vote on this November. And the question before them will be, should the spouses, Gold Star spouses, they're called, the surviving spouses of someone who gave their life in defense of our country or contracted a disease or were injured in a way that led to their death, should those Gold Star spouses also get a homestead exemption? So it's a tax credit on the property for the first $200,000 of value of that home. And so it's a small acknowledgement to a surviving spouse of someone who gave their life in defense of our country, we want to say thank you to you, and that's one way we can do it. So I would encourage people to support House Concurrent Resolution 1003, and I should know the referendum number, and I don't, I apologize, but it's the Gold Star Spouse tax deduction.
Thank you, Senator Lundeen, and thank you for your work on that. I wanted to actually engage in dialogue on that when that bill came to our committee, but I was on another committee while I should have been chairing my committee. So I'm glad that you were able to get that done. I think that's a great initiative. I was looking for it. We'll find it later. I'll just add one of the things that I'm excited about is the Colorado income tax deduction cap to fund school meals program measure. It's on the ballot, creates a funding mechanism for the healthy school meals for all program to provide free school meals to all students in Colorado public schools. And it provides local food purchasing grants and increased wages for employees that prepare and serve food. You know, one of the challenges that Senator Lundeen and I have, and it goes back to even the at-risk school finance measure, is that there are families who might make just $1 over a threshold and they don't qualify, and there's families that might make significantly more. It's challenging because we want to really serve the families who are the least of these, but we also know that there are different circumstances where children may not have the access to eat. So we are hoping that this measure will pass in order to provide free meals for every student in the state of Colorado. And I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to do it where it is reaching our students who are in most need of a meal, which is a basic need to survive, let alone be able to focus in class and learn when you have an empty stomach. So excited about that measure on the ballot.
Thank you both. Well, we are at time. We had a question around this work. It is tough and it is thankless at times. So I truly want to thank you both for taking the time to share all that transpired in this last legislative session. Truly, this was a wonderful conversation, and I'm so thankful to have facilitated it. I'm also want to thank our guests for joining us today and sharing comments and just listening and learning with us. I do want to share with you all that the guests will be receiving an email with ideas for ways to engage about the topics we discussed today. We also will be sharing in the chat a sign up for our policy newsletter. We'd love for you to continue to join us in our journey and stay up to date on the things that we are working on. We also want all of your feedback today about this event. So we're going to be also sharing a survey in the chat and would love for you to answer it. It's just 5 to 6 questions, shouldn't take you more than a few moments to complete. And that's all that we have for today. We again invite you to join us and stay tuned for other topics of discussion in the upcoming year. And thank you again for making the time today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.